Welcome back. Creation. What a wonderful world, right? If you're part of the Abrahamic religions, then you've heard of the story of Adam and Eve. Honestly, you've probably heard of it regardless of what religion you do or do not ascribe to. Adam, the perfect man, is created from the dust of the earth. He is formed and then life is breathed into him, animating the first man. And then Eve is created and they live in the Garden of Eden until Eve is tempted by eating the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. And then they're cast out of the garden. Now, of course, in Genesis, creation actually happens twice. First, in Genesis 1, they are created male and female. And then in Genesis 2, a creation occurs a second time. First male, then female. This is where the story of Adam and Eve begins. But is it really the beginning? Let's see. Welcome to the Occult and the Apocalypse with Kristen, aka Fire Terror Mama, where I tell you how they took what was once widely known about God, spirituality, and you, and how they took that and locked that away. Come with me while I tell you what I've learned from science, religion, cultural beliefs, and mythology to turn the occult and the apocalypse into just the hidden and the revealed. Now, many people do believe this is the beginning. They will even tell you that the first creation in Genesis 1:27 shows, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he them. It's just the high level creation. And the second creation that we see is just more detailed from the same perspective. However, the word Adam here, meaning man, is not meant to be a name. It's actually meant to be the word human or mankind as a whole. After the first Adam, when referring to who we call Adam, the word that they use is Ha-Adam, which means the man. So why have we assigned the word referring to all humans to be instead the name Adam? And do we find Adam in other accounts? When looking back to the earliest of everything, I almost always automatically go to the earliest civilizations. And in this case, it's the cultures in Mesopotamia. These were the people who invented time, the wheel, and writing, and pretty much everything that we know about currently. So we'll start with the ancient Sumerians, Akkadians, and Babylonians, which we frequently see have a similar structure between their stories and Genesis from the Bible. Now, the Sumerians had as one of their texts the Eridu Genesis, also known as the Sumerian creation myth and the Sumerian flood myth. It is known only by fragments, and there are only 3 known copies. It gives a description of how humanity is created by the gods, the origin of the cities and kingship, as well as the tale of a global flood. The oldest known fragment is from 1600 BC. It's believed that this Sumerian myth recounted localized river flooding from around 3000 BC to 2900 BC. So it was written down like 13 to 1600 years more. However, the first lines from all 3 fragments, which is believed to be detailing the creation of humans, are missing from all 3 fragments. But if we look back further in time, around 1800 BC, we see that's about the same time as the biblical Isaac. There's the Atrahasis. It is an 18th century BC Akkadian epic. In this epic, there are three tiers for the gods. There is the father god and primordial gods. Then there are the Anunnaki gods. And then there are lesser gods called Ajiji. The Ajiji are being forced to work the land for the greater gods. The lesser gods begin to rebel, and in order to fix the imbalance, a combination of the gods and the material of the earth is made into man. In the epic, man is made just as in Genesis out of clay. This clay is mixed up with the blood of a god that was sacrificed to accomplish this feat. Unfortunately, after the creation of man, some of the text is lost. But when it picks back up, a female is placed next to the man. It's not clear, due to the missing text, if this female is created in the same way as the male, or if she's made from him, like we see in Genesis. This first couple is not named, and they're also not the only humans that are made. They're taught agriculture and begin rapidly multiplying. Eventually, per this myth, they become too noisy, and because of that, there are so many of them, the flood is sent. In this epic, the version of Noah is named Atrahasis. Although the first man is not named here, the Akkadian word for mankind is a willow. So it's very likely that it shared some similarities to a willow as a name. Separately, there was the myth of Adapa. Adapa was the mortal son of the god A. In this myth, it said that Adapa was the first mortal. Adapa was called to the creator god Anu to account for some actions he had taken, and he was told by his father A not to eat or drink anything while visiting Anu, reporting that it would kill him. Adapa, which is believed by some to later be transliterated to Adamu, refused food and drink, which would make him immortal because he trusted A. All of these accounts seem to have hints of Genesis within them. They were all written hundreds, if not thousands, of years before Genesis, that we know, was written in Babylonian captivity. And they were written and stored in the same region as the Babylonian captivity. We also see with the Atrahasis, a copy of this was found at the site of Amarna in Egypt, where Pharaoh Akhenaten had moved the capital during his Egyptian monotheism. If you haven't seen my episode on that, you should check that out. If you have seen my episode on either Akhenaten or Moses, you'll know that this contributes to my theory that Abrahamic beliefs were influenced by Babylon via Egypt. But you'll have to go check those episodes out to get the full picture there. Another important fact are the similar themes within these stories. The creation, the chance at everlasting life through certain foods, toiling the ground, and other themes seem to be mimicked as the younger Genesis that we know today. Interestingly, Adam not being a single individual, but instead being a group of humankind may be echoed directly in Genesis itself later on. Adam is created out of clay, given the breath of life, and then Eve is created as a companion. They're placed in the garden until they disobey God, and then they're cast out and forced to toil. Cain and Abel are born, and eventually Cain kills Abel. Angry with Cain, God curses Cain to be a nomad, and Cain's response is, "Anyone who finds me will kill me." God then tells Cain that anyone who kills him will have 7 times the vengeance of God upon them. God then gives Cain the mark of Cain. Both Cain and God are referring to a people other than Adam, Eve, or Cain himself, or anyone in their family. meaning that there are humans in existence that can interact with this perfect or first family. From this perspective, it backs up that Adam was not a single man, but a species of humans. And Genesis is simply the family history of a single family and not necessarily all people on earth. Now, knowing what we know about the interbreeding between Cro-Magnon, Neanderthal, and Denisovan hominids, is it possible that the story of Adam and Eve is actually the story of creation of Cro-Magnon, and the other people were the competing hominid species? I think it's possible that we have a shared memory of Cro-Magnon versus other human species. Now, much later in history, the Norse have Ask and Embla as the names of their first people. According to the story, which is said to be written down about 1300 AD, however, it's thought to be in oral traditions much longer. According to the tradition, Vili, Vi, and Odin were walking along a beach and found two trees. They used these trees to create the first man and woman. Odin gave them the breath of life, and the other two gave them movement, intelligence, shape, and their senses. They were then given clothing and names. They were given a place in Midgard, or the earthly realm, and they go on to become the parents of all humans. Now, the Norse also had a Garden of Eden, where the goddess Eden kept the tree that bore the fruit that provided the Norse gods with immortality, but Ask and Embla never resided there. I could go on to tell you other creation myths around the globe, all with different couples, but what I would like to focus on is Adam. Adam, who may have been Awilo or Adapa or Ask in various myths. And the reason this is important to me is the similarities that they may have all had that morphed into Adam. So is Genesis a collective memory? Creation itself seems to be described similarly across not just the region, but across the world with small variations. Or was Genesis simply the account of a single family in the Mesopotamian and then later Levantine area? Well, that would certainly explain the people that Cain was worried about, and frankly makes Genesis more realistic. And again, we know the first 5 books of the Torah or the Bible were written when the Israelites were in Babylonian captivity around 538 BC. And it's very possible that these books in the Abrahamic religions are kind of like an enmeshment of oral tradition and folklore from around where they were. We also know that Babylon would have had libraries holding all of these stories, and Babylon was actually religiously open. And the stories of the gods of anyone that they conquered were often celebrated, stored there, and worshipped there. Yahweh himself has been found to be worshipped there. And this includes the Zoroastrians, which, if you watched my episode on Zoroastrianism, you'll find has similarities to the newly, at the time, monotheistic Israelites, and even later Christianity. So is it possible that Judaism and later, therefore, Christianity and Islam were formed by the enmeshment of these traditions and stories as they were in Babylon? Well, the earliest example of Genesis in Hebrew is dated to between 200 BC and 100 AD, and we have no earlier examples of the Hebrew Genesis. Now, shifting a little bit, I want to talk to you about the first use of the name that would eventually translate to Adam. In order to do that, I have to shift even further back in time to about 2600 to 2300 BC to the Assyrian Kings List. Now, the Assyrian Kings List, which scholars agree remains consistent across 3 different incomplete lists, were found all in all three Assyrian capitals: Ashur, Ar-Sakun, and Nineveh. According to these lists, the first 17 kings dwelt in tents, indicating that they were more nomadic in nature. The second name on this list was Adamu. Adamu succeeded Teuda, and Adamu was succeeded by Yanki. This is the first time that we see Adamu as a name. So the earliest record of Adamu comes from an unconfirmed second king of the nomadic Assyrians. These 17 kings who dwelt in tents have never been confirmed, and this use of Adamu is long before Hebrew exists, let alone the Hebrew mention of Ha-Adam, or the man. Another very interesting aspect of this is Adamu's successor. Adamu, the 10th king, was succeeded by Yanki. Now that's spelled Yanqi. When you look in an interlinear Bible, which would have been written in Hebrew, which is a much younger language, you see something interesting when Cain is born. Cain's name is an English translation. In biblical Hebrew, in Genesis, the Hebrew word is Qayin, Qayin, which uses all the same letters as Yankee, but inverting the Q and the Y. Is this a smoking gun? No, but is it a thread to potentially follow someday? Could be. That could be that the comparison stops there, but it's definitely interesting to think about, particularly since Cain was told to be nomadic. So, was biblical Adam real? It's possible. Do all humans descend from a single man? Yes, our genetic makeup proves that we were potentially the descendants of a single male and a single female. Were they a pair? That remains a question not yet answered. Up until a year ago, January 2025, Scientific Eve and Scientific Adam, as they've been lovingly named, were separated by tens of thousands to almost maybe as much as 100,000 years. Science has been able to track the mother of all current humans to about 150,000 to 200,000 years ago, and she was called Scientific Eve. This was tracked through mitochondrial DNA. And scientists have been able to track the father of all humans, based on humans as they are now, using the Y chromosome to about 60,000 years ago. This was Scientific Adam. Just over a year ago, that would have been the whole story. Basically, it would have indicated that Scientific Adam fathered children with one or more of Scientific Eve's descendants, and all of us now are directly related to both as common ancestors. Both are traced back to Africa using genetic mutation. Scientific Eve was found using the female-driven mitochondrial DNA, and Scientific Adam was traced through the male population using the Y chromosome. And it was expected that they were separated by 50,000 to 100,000 years. This work was all done in the late 80s and in through the 90s. But in January 2025, that all changed. Further sequencing of the Y chromosome determined that Scientific Adam and Scientific Eve may have lived at the same time. The dating of Scientific Eve's mitochondrial DNA gets moved slightly forward in the timeline, and more importantly, Scientific Adam's Y chromosome gets pushed back on the timeline. Suddenly, both appear to be living around 100,000 years ago. These two adjustments were unexpected and unintended result of what was originally believed to be mundane work, really just furthering previously accomplished work. Nothing special to see here. But the researchers realized they had stumbled onto something important. Now, there is more research to do, and I caution you because it may not have been a love match. It could have been the children of one may have reproduced with the children of another, or even further removed. However, it does take the concept of descending from one single couple into more of a possibility. We only know of Adam and Eve's living sons to be Cain and Seth, and expect that there were unnamed daughters. However, in more ancient Jewish traditions, Adam and Eve had 33 sons and 23 daughters. That's certainly plenty of room to sneak in the genome as the mother and father of all humans today. So, is it possible that we all originate from a single pair of people? Not in the literal sense, as in only these two humans existed, but could they be the predominant DNA contributors to an existing and already varied population? Yeah, they can. Now, interestingly enough, the whole reason for this week's episode was based off of a conversation I had with my 9-year-old daughter. I was having a conversation with her about atoms, the small particles that make up all matter. And the following conversation happened. I said, "Oh, I don't know. It probably has something to do with atoms." And she asked, "What are atoms?" And I said, "Oh, atoms are the small particles that make up everything that exists." And she responded, "Oh, cool." And they named it after the man. I was confused for a couple of seconds, and I said the man, and she responded, "The first man, Adam." I chuckled to myself and I told her, although I thought it was a really amazing conclusion, that I didn't quite think that they were connected, but maybe that they were. And with some easy research, it's true. They're not connected at all. The etymology of the word atom comes from Latin atomus, meaning indivisible particle. It was first proposed in ancient Greek world as the earliest atomic theory is from around 400 BC by Greek philosophers, Leucippus and then later Democritus. These theories survived with Aristotle, Theophrastus, and others. So, atomic theory is almost as old as monotheistic Judaism. Although the two are not connected by etymology or even a scientific hat tip to the reported first man, it struck me as funny and more evidence how the divine universe works. Atoms, the particles once thought to be the smallest particles that make up everything, sounding so similar to the name of the man attributed to our origin. And since I don't believe in coincidences, I have to believe that the divine has created this universe to be an echo of itself. But I'll leave that for you to think about. Come back next week. We're going to talk about Egyptian obelisks, which now reside all over the world. Why are they there? What do they mean? What were they for in the past? Why are they there now? But in the meantime, thank you for helping me take the occult and the apocalypse into just the hidden and the revealed. And I'll see you next week.